What's happening, everybody? We are back. I'm Nolan Kelly with Ben Rasa. We are breaking down the NFC North division with four teams: the Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, and Detroit Lions for your fantasy football teams. Make sure to check out all of our season long content over at Osmo.com. Ben and I have been working down, putting out 32 team previews. We are almost done, just the NFC West to come. It is getting close. We're at like 50,000 words here, but we are ready for the NFL season as well. Osmo has his season long projections, which we made free this season, and there are some really interesting takes on there. So be sure to check them out. Even if you disagree, there are some really good late round flyers I think that you can target using his projections. So a valuable asset. But let's dig right into this division with the Chicago Bears, defending division champs, I believe. I totally spaced out there, but I'm
That's
assuming that
true.
they
I
are.
mean, it's certainly
Yeah,
not the Vikings, thanks to Kirk Cousins.
that's right. That's
But
right.
Bears, interesting team this year for sure.
They've added David Montgomery out of Iowa State, who is expected to take over the lead back duties, even though Tariq Cohen will be used as a pass catcher. Cordarrelle Patterson as well comes over, probably in a special teams role, but also as a field stretcher. There's not a lot going on with this offense. It's probably much ado about nothing, and more we can pretty much expect what we saw last year. What are your thoughts on Mitch Trubisky, who had a lot of huge games last season, but also some very bad games? And after his shoulder injury, his numbers went drastically down from weeks 4 to 17 from a fantasy perspective. Are you interested in him at all in season-long leagues or best ball?
A little in best ball just because he's shown the ability to really put up some big showings. A lot of that was sneaky due to ground performance. He had some scrambles in there, found the end zone through the legs, but I don't know. I'm still a little skeptical of bad decision making at times. I will say that for the Bears clearly to continue to take the next step, they're going to need him to progress. So there is some insight. He's got some weapons. You mentioned Montgomery, Allen Robinson, Trey Burton. It's not like he's the cupboard's barren, but at the same time, I think for me, it's if the opportunity falls, maybe, but I'm not looking to make him a priority.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's a much better target in best balls. If
Agree.
he is my quarterback two, I probably want to get a fairly good quarterback one. If I'm drafting him as a quarterback one, then I want to probably take three quarterbacks. But I really like his in-week upside, where he's probably gonna give you five cute top five performances in the year, and that's what you want for best ball leagues. So not a bad pick there. Let's move on to wide receiver: Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, Anthony Miller from the slot had some really encouraging numbers last year. But he actually ranked higher than Allen Robinson in contested catch rate, and Robinson was one of the leaders in the NFL, though he didn't have enough targets to qualify. What are you doing with these guys? Because I kind of like Allen Robinson at his ADP, but he is moving up a little bit.
He is. That is where I would go as well. We saw him have some big games, obviously against the Eagles, huge game late, and it's someone another. And this is going to be the theme of a lot of these videos, at least from my vantage point. Guys that haven't stayed healthy all the time, I do think there's a natural buy low cost there where people get a little worried about, they're banged up, and I get it's a concern. Someone like Allen Robinson, if he can stay healthy, I'm absolutely there. Even with Trubisky being a little erratic, if he takes the next step, someone like Robinson's clearly going to benefit. I think he has a really good 2019.
I agree with you. He had 750 yards in 13 games last year and played with broken ribs. He's 3 years removed from a 1,400-yard receiving season in Jacksonville, and he just seems to have the physical talent and the tools, I think, to become at least a decent mid-level wide receiver too. So I'm targeting him in drafts for sure. Don't have much of these other guys though, so I'm kind of with you. Are you in on Tariq Cohen, or are you buying the David Montgomery hype? Apparently, they are very high on him and want to keep him on the field as much as possible.
It's a tricky situation because I saw a ton of him in college. I really was high. I thought it was a great pick. But now that the hype is building on a guy like Montgomery, Cohen should still have a role. They want to get him the ball in space. It's a volume issue with him. He can make the most of a handful of touches on any given week, but when you're not getting a carved out role, the floor is so low that it's really hard to trust him in season long, especially if you need those type of points week in and week out.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this breaks down. I have not been high on David Montgomery all year, and I think that was a mistake. He's moving up in drafts and probably for good reason. I think it'll be interesting to see if they use him in a pass catching role because I think that's where his upside will come from. Tariq Cohen's one of my favorite picks in best balls. He's currently going as the RB 27 and he finished as the RB 13 last year, and that was in half point PPR. So he's one of these guys that's undervalued, I think, because people view him as sort of a gadget player, but he has huge upside and pretty safe floor, especially if you're in a PPR league. How about the most boring tight end draftable that's possibly a tight end 1, tight end 2, Trey Burton? He was the big sleeper last offseason for everyone and like put up a respectable line, but I don't know if there's enough upside for me to get excited. I'm certainly not reaching for him. He's the kind of guy that I take if he falls a couple rounds beyond his ADP. What are you doing with him?
It's hard to really say much different than that. It's even last year, we just saw like, the guy disappears. He doesn't have a role. The volume's not there. A lot of things need to go right, and that's even to have a couple big games. Never mind, streamlined, consistent performances. So not really for me this year. There's a lot of tight ends, as I've mentioned in some of these videos already, that I'm pretty high on. He's not one of them.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather wait a few rounds and take someone like Delaney Walker or Jordan Reed or someone like that who has the upside of Burton for a much lower ADP. Let's move on to the Detroit Lions. It doesn't get much more exciting than the Detroit Lions, but apparently there's a little bit of buzz in the analytics community that the Detroit Lions actually might be a sleeper contender for the division this year. We will see about that. Matt Stafford played with broken bones in his neck last season. They've added TJ Hawkinson out of Iowa with their first-round pick. Danny Amendola should be patrolling the slot, taking over for the departed Golden Tate. He was traded last season. C.J. Anderson's going to come up and back up Kerryon Johnson, who's also back from injury, and Theo Riddick was cut. Let's start with Stafford. He is going underdrafted right now as the QB 24. He hasn't finished lower than QB 15 over the past 5 years. Do you have any interest in him at that ADP?
A little, just the ADP is dictating in a bit, but I will say I think that the days of seeing Stafford sling it an insane amount of times may be over. This team with Patricia, I think they start to look to someone like Kerryon Johnson. And I'll say this, I'm not high on the Lions, but if they even hang around in the division, I think it's because of Kerryon Johnson, not because of Stafford. I think the efficiency goes up for him after a really down 2018. I'm just not sure the volume is going to be, as much as we would want for a guy like that.
Well, that's a nice segue over to Kerryon Johnson. He was very good last season before he was injured with a 5.4 yards per carry average, which ranks second in the NFL. His work in the passing game was really good. He had an 81.1 PFF receiving grade. So I kind of like this pick as well. I think people are onto it, though. We've seen his stock rise in the last few weeks after Theo Riddick was cut. So he's going in that like Leonard Fournette range, which to me is about where he should go. But I think that mitigates his upside. If you were drafting him a little bit earlier on in the season, you were getting him in like the mid-30s, and that was like a pretty good bargain, I think. But I'm also happy to use C.J. Anderson as a late-round flyer in case anything does happen to Johnson. We've seen what he can do. I think he's a capable back, and he would just take over late duties. But let's move on to wide receiver. Kenny Golladay, another one of the super popular sleepers this year. We have Marvin Jones, who's perennially one of the more underrated options, and Danny Amendola, who probably will catch 4 passes for 48 yards every single game this year. Do you like any of these guys any more than the field? Are you targeting any of them?
So the guy, and you just said it, Marvin Jones is a forgotten man, and he's really talented. Golden Tate's not there anymore. And specifically for best ball, I think that Marvin Jones is really interesting. Deep threat, he's going to disappear at times, but we have seen games against even elite corners. He can have those monster couple touchdowns only on a handful of receptions. The volume is not the most secure in the world, but with guys like Amendola underneath, I think it's a pretty balanced attack. And Galladay's taking a lot of, A, coverage and B, hype. So I'm looking at Marvin Jones maybe as an under the radar type play this year.
Yeah, I like that too. I've been grabbing him like in best balls. He's going in like the 90 range, which I think like he's a decent wide receiver 3. So I have absolutely no problem grabbing him there. He's going to give you a few big games every year as well. So I'll be targeting this offense in NFL DFS in week 1, hoping that the much anticipated Cliff Kingsbury offense has the pace to push this total high and the Detroit Lions go under-owned, especially with Patrick Peterson suspended for the first 6 games of the year. But that was a little bit of a tangent. So let's finish off with tight end. An interest in T.J. Hawkinson. Rookie tight ends don't usually do that well in the NFL, but he might be the exception to the rule. He's certainly very talented. Are you drafting him at all?
Not really. Talented guy, him, another one out of Iowa. They produce him, Kittle and many others. So I get it. I just think that more often than not, you're going to be fine if you go elsewhere. I'm not sure how many situations he really kills you, and I just find other players that I'd rather take a flyer on.
I agree. Over the top of the top 12 tight ends each year in the last five, only Evan Ingram has finished in the as a tight end one as a rookie in the last 5 years. It was a long way of saying that, but yeah, I think if you're better off fading rookie tight ends over the long haul and picking up those guys who disappointed in year one. Let's move on to the Green Bay Packers. Fascinating team here. We have possibly one of the most uncreative play callers in the NFL, Mike McCarthy, moving on. We have Matt LaFleur coming over from the Tennessee Titans, where he led the 27th passing offense in the NFL last season. But I think he can be at least a little bit forgiven for that because he was dealing with Blake Bortles and a hobbled Marcus Mariota for most of that season. The Green Bay Packers haven't really added much offensively. They lost Randall Cobb, which should free up about 57 targets. It looks like Geronimo Allison is going to be running in the slot, and it looks like Aaron Jones will probably have a more clearly defined role. I think this offense is going to be better. I think they're going to use a lot of play action, which is what LaFleur is known for, and I think we're going to see just a better play calling from them, which will lead to increased fantasy. What are your general thoughts on this offense?
I would hope so. The race. I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers guy. I think everyone knows how good he is, but they're wasting possibly his best years here. They need to get it back. They should be a perennial Super Bowl contender each year. Aaron Jones should solidify that run game. He's got Devontae Adams on the outside. MVS and Allison should be able to do enough. Tight end, not a super great situation, but at the same time, there's plenty of weapons there. So if the play calling can be good, I expect Rodgers to have a bounce back year. He was banged up from the start, right from the Bears game on opening night. So this is a really good opportunity to buy low on this Packers team.
Yeah, it's Aaron Rodgers is really interesting because we've seen him perform as a top three quarterback for years, but where he's going with his current ADP, which is quarterback four, he might be actually ahead of Andrew Luck now with a calf injury. That's a little bit too high for me, given that he hasn't really been great these past few years. So I haven't gotten to a lot of him. I'd rather wait on guys like Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, and Lamar Jackson a few rounds later. But I have no problem taking him with all these weapons. Let's move on to probably the most interesting aspect of this team, the wide receivers with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Geronimo Allison, Jake Kumaro, Equiminius St. Brown, all battling for roles in this offense to go along with Devontae Adams. Here's my favorite stat of all this season that I've unearthed, and it's not really a lot of unearthing. It's really obvious, but Devontae Adams had at least 16 PPR fantasy points in every single game last season. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
Are you drafting him as high as that? And what do you think of these other depth receivers?
It's tough. I mean, that's the thing. It's not just weighing how you like the player; it's weighing against what you're paying the opportunity cost, and it's going so high. One of the safest floors out there, so I get it. Not getting to a ton in best ball and things like that, to be honest. Just didn't get there. It's not like I don't like him, but Allison is the guy I particularly want to talk about. Had a 2018 cut short. I think it was with a groin injury, but he looked productive, flashed some upside, and obviously when you have Rodgers there, if the play calling cooperates, it could be a really good bounce back spot. The targets will be there. Maybe he can take some of that Cobb production that's been lost. So I don't mind taking a stab with someone like Geronimo Allison.
I think he's the best bet, and probably whoever gets that slot role is going to have the safest floor as well. So I'm in agreement with you there. Though I do think Valdez Scantling is also that could change in a heartbeat. So I think both are viable. One thing I was doing early on in the year is just taking both in drafts. In best balls and kind of hoping that one of them takes that lead role, but that's a bit of a risky proposition. It feels like a bit of a hedge. Let's move on to running back. Aaron Jones, are you high on him at his current ADP? Kind of going in the middle of the 20s, late 20s, early 30s for the last month. He was in a timeshare last year with Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is probably the worst running back in the NFL for my money, whereas Aaron Jones averaged 5.5 yards per carry and led the NFL last season. I like Aaron Jones a lot. My only concern is that I do think there have been rumblings about another timeshare, and I'm worried that he's not going to get lead back duties.
Where he's going to need that. It's not his talent alone can't carry him. He's going to need real opportunity and not get vultured. by some of these guys. I'm skeptical, but I'm hoping that LaFleur will realize that he has, I think, a very talented back, and he should unleash him, pair him with Rodgers, get creative, not just in the running game, get him the ball, pass catching, which adds up really quickly, half point or full point PPR, obviously. So it's a guy that I don't mind taking, but it is tough when you need the coach to cooperate, and obviously we've seen for years it was different with McCarthy, but there's a lot of unknowns with what exactly they want to do in Green Bay.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's a high risk, high reward kind of a pick. I've been fading him too, just because I'd rather, or sorry, I didn't know if you said you're fading, but I'd rather just take guys like T.Y. Hilton, Amari Cooper in that range who have some proven production and play it a little bit safer and grab maybe risky running backs later. Let's finish off with tight end here. Jimmy Graham, down year again last year, finished as the tight end 16, but he's probably due for some positive touchdown regression. Do you have any interest in him in best balls as like a late rounder or like as like a last round tight end pick?
I don't mind it. He killed me last year in DFS many, many times. He should be finding the end zone more often than not. I think that if someone like, we've mentioned in previous videos, someone like Jordan Reed, Delaney Walker, there's some other tight ends that I have kind of towards the later stages that I'm a little higher on. But Jimmy Graham's a talented guy. Obviously, we saw in Seattle how good he can be. And when you have Rodgers, sky's the limit. But it doesn't seem like the best years seem to be behind him.
Yep, 100% agree. It's kind of a safe play, but I think he's actually got a little bit gas left in the tank, so I don't mind him as like a really late pick, especially if he's dropping in best balls. But let's move on. Last team in the division, Minnesota Vikings. Fascinating one as well. Coaching change, or sorry, coordinator change towards the end of the season, promoting John DeFilippo firing John DeFilippo and hiring Kevin Stefanski in his stead. The move immediately paid dividends for them on the ground anyways. Their rushing success rate went from 40% to 48%, and their pass rate dipped from 62% to 52%. It went from the third highest passing offense in the NFL to the seventh lowest down the stretch last year. And they've also hired Gary Kubiak as an offensive advisor as well. Do you think that the end of this season is the end of their season last year is going to be indicative of what they're going to do this year, or will it balance out a little bit and this will kind of be a middle of the road passing and running offense?
I think it swung a little severely towards the end of last year, but at the same time, I think they can find a happy medium, not just with Cousins, but with the offense in general, where he's not slinging it all over. They can utilize, maybe raise his efficiency, and they can lean, knock on wood, if he can stay healthy, on Dalvin Cook. They did waste a draft pick, and I say waste even though I'm high on Madison out of Boise State. Now they have a stable of backs. They should be able to dictate a lot of games on the ground, but Dalvin Cook, if he can stay healthy, no reason he can't have a big 2019.
Yeah, I'm with you there on Cook. It's going to be interesting as well to see like if he can stay healthy. I think that's going to be the question. Like he hasn't proven that he can thus far, and that's probably caused his stock to drop a little bit into the sort of late first round. A bit of a risky play there. I'm actually higher on this passing offense, I think, than most. Let's move on to the wide receivers here. Are you into Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs? I think Thielen's actually going a little bit lower than he should because people are expecting this to be a run-heavy offense. And it's possible when you look at some of Gary Kubiak's trends anyways, he actually usually has a pretty balanced offense. It's just that his running game is effective and he's known for it. So I'm kind of buying low a little bit on Thielen right now and scooping him up in the second round. And Diggs is kind of a little bit of a round later sort of option. What are you doing with either of these guys?
Diggs is the guy I lean to. You can get him a little later in best ball. I lean to him just because if he's more natural, I think a little less stable and a little more volatility, which I can live with, more of a home run threat. Thielen last year, that was one of the most unbelievable stretches right out of the gate. It was basically just a lock for 100 yards, just finding the end zone, and then it slowed down as you knew it will. He should have a fine year. Like I said, I'm more apt to get to Diggs. For me, I'm going to embrace volatility with this team. I think there's a lot of big ceiling performances and then a lot where they don't really get there. So that more yields itself to a best ball type situation.
I am in 100% agreement with you. Shifting back to running backs really quickly, I do think Alexander Madison is a nice option in the late round of best balls. If you think that Cook can't stay healthy, you immediately get an RB1 if he goes down. So that's something to consider. High risk, high reward. Any interest in Kyle Rudolph?
Not really. Just seems like a situation where the ceiling is so limited. He's not really viable in a ton of situations.
I agree. It's a pretty boring pick when you take Kyle Rudolph in your draft. So, yeah, nothing to get excited about there. All right, that wraps up the division for us. We have two more divisions to preview. We will be up next with the NFC South, one of my favorite divisions this year. Make sure to check out all of our content over on osmo.com, our season long rankings, our team previews, our positional breakdowns. We got loads more coming. So, yeah, have a look and head on over to our page. Ben, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you soon.